The surprise encounter. The stars stretched endlessly across the dark expanse of space as the alien fleet cruised smoothly toward their destination. They were a proud and powerful species, one of the most advanced in the galaxy. They had conquered many planets, and Earth, with its small population and primitive technology, had never been considered much of a threat. The alien fleet had no reason to believe anything would be different now. At the head of the fleet, Captain Frex, a seasoned and confident leader, stood tall in the command center of the flagship Aster. His 6 eyes scanned the vast star field displayed on the screens in front of him, his mind focused on the task ahead. Earth was just another stop on their journey, a place to gather resources and establish dominance. "Captain, we're approaching the Earth system," reported Zula, his second-in-command, her voice calm but steady. "No signs of military presence or any major defenses. It looks like another easy target." Frex's lips curled into a smile. His people have faced no true opposition in years, and Earth seemed like nothing more than a speck in the universe. He flicked his fingers across a holographic display, zooming in on the Earth. It appeared small, vulnerable, and utterly defenseless. No fleet, no weapons, just an underdeveloped world with no chance against the might of the alien empire. "Prepare for the first wave," Frex ordered, his voice carrying authority. "We will make a statement today. Let the humans see their place in the galaxy." The fleet, led by the Aster, surged forward, breaking through the vast emptiness of space. The alien ships were massive and sleek, their dark metallic surfaces reflecting the cold stars in the distance. They were designed for dominance, with powerful weapons and shields that made them nearly invincible. But even as they closed in on Earth, something unexpected caught Frex's attention. "Captain, we're picking up something on the outer edges of the Earth system," Zula said, her voice tinged with surprise. "It's a ship." Frex frowned. "A ship? This far out? It must be a small civilian vessel, probably some kind of transport or research ship. There is no way it could be a threat to us." Zula, ever cautious, raised an eyebrow. "It's moving toward us, Captain, and it's fast. Faster than any civilian vessel should be able to travel." Frex scoffed. "Faster than a civilian ship? Nonsense. Prepare to ignore it. We have more important matters to attend to." But even as he spoke, a sense of unease began to creep over him. Something about this situation felt off. He glanced at the sensor readouts again, his eyes narrowing as the unknown ship drew closer. It was not like anything he had ever seen before. Its design was sleek but sturdy, and it appeared to be powered by some form of technology that was far beyond Earth's known capabilities. His confidence began to waver for the first time. "Wait," Frex said, his voice hardening. "Lock onto that ship. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." The sensors hummed as the fleet's advanced technology scanned the approaching ship. Frex's eyes widened when the results appeared on the screen. The ship was no civilian transport, it was a warship. A human warship. "Impossible," Frex muttered under his breath. "This cannot be right. Earth can barely manage basic space travel. How could they possibly have a warship?" Zula's expression was a mix of concern and confusion. "It's not just a warship, Captain. The energy signature coming from it is off the charts. It's unlike anything we've ever encountered. We need to be careful." Frex gritted his teeth. "Careful? With this, it's one ship. We outnumber them 1,000 to 1. There's no way they can stand against us." But the doubt remained. Something about this ship seemed different. He could feel the shift in the air, the weight of uncertainty settling over him and his crew. The alien fleet continued to close the distance, but the human warship did not retreat. Instead, it locked onto them, its weapons primed and ready. The sensors flickered as the human ship powered up. Its shields began to pulse with an unnatural light. It was ready for a fight. Frex's hand tightened on the control panel, his mind racing. Could this ship really be a threat? Or was this a mistake, a glitch in the system? No, the humans had no business building such a vessel. Earth was supposed to be a minor, inconsequential world. This couldn't be happening. "Prepare for a warning shot," Frex ordered. His voice was sharp, his authority returning. "We will show them who rules this part of the galaxy. Fire at will." The order was given, and the alien ships released a powerful blast of energy, a warning shot meant to intimidate and dissuade the human vessel. The blast streaked across space, a brilliant arc of destruction aimed straight at the warship. But to Threx's shock, the human warship didn't even flinch. Instead, the human ship's shields flared up, glowing brightly as they absorbed the entire impact without so much as a dent. The alien fleet's commander stared at the display in disbelief. How could this be? How could the humans withstand their firepower with ease? A cold knot of fear formed in Threx's chest as he realized this encounter might not be as easy as he had thought. The unknown ship was not only surviving, it was preparing for retaliation. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. The first clash. As the alien fleet loomed closer, a silence settled over the command center of the Asta. The atmosphere was thick with uncertainty, a strange feeling for Captain Frex, who had led countless campaigns without ever doubting his superiority. Yet now, he could not shake the nagging sense that this encounter was unlike anything he had faced before. "Captain, the human warship is locking onto us," Zula reported, her voice steady, but Frex could hear the hint of tension in it. The battle was about to begin, and the unknowns were mounting by the second. Frex's fingers clenched into fists. Focus on the mission. Prepare to engage. No more surprises. His tone was commanding, but even he couldn't hide the slight tremor of doubt that crept into his voice. With a swipe of his hand, the entire fleet activated their weapon systems. The Asta's massive cannons hummed to life, its energy reserves surging as they prepared to fire. The rest of the fleet followed suit, their weaponry ready for the attack that would bring the human warship to its knees. "Fire," Threx ordered. A streak of brilliant, crimson energy erupted from the flagship, followed by a chorus of laser blasts from the other ships in the fleet. The force of the barrage lit up the vacuum of space like a deadly fireworks display. The first shot, a direct hit aimed squarely at the human warship's shields, ripped through the dark, the aliens expecting nothing more than a flash of destruction. But instead of crumpling under the weight of the firepower, the human ship's shields flared brightly, absorbing the shots with a calm, almost defiant resistance. The energy rippled across the surface of the warship, but it held firm. The alien fleet watched in stunned silence as the human ship remained unharmed. "Impossible," Zula whispered. "This ship, it's more than we expected." Frex's jaw tightened. The unexpected resilience of the human vessel left him rattled, but there was no turning back now. He activated his communication link to the fleet. "Increase firepower. Target their shields and their engines. We break them now." The fleet's barrage intensified, and the air crackled with energy as laser beams and plasma bolts raced toward the human ship. For a moment, it seemed like the entire universe had frozen in time. Alien ships in formation, their weapons firing in unison, the human ship standing alone and resolute against the storm of destruction. Then, just as the final barrage was about to land, something incredible happened. The human warship, seemingly out of nowhere, evasive, almost preternaturally so, began to shift positions, moving faster than the aliens could track. It wasn't just a small maneuver to dodge shots. It was as if the human ship was anticipating every move the fleet made. The fleet's weapons, which had been designed to overpower the most advanced civilizations, now seemed slow and predictable. The human ship zipped from one side to the other, dodging blast after blast, its hull untouched despite the violent explosions in space. The Asta's firepower, once overwhelming, now seemed to barely miss its target every time. Frex's hands gripped the armrest of his chair, his knuckles white, as the ship danced through space, evading their best attempts to destroy it. "How is it moving like that?" Zula gasped. "We can't keep up. It's too fast." Frex growled, his eyes fixed on the holographic map. The human warship's movements were precise, almost mechanical, but there was something strange about it. The way it moved suggested an intelligence behind its controls, an intelligence that seemed to read and respond to the alien fleet's every action. "Captain, their shields are still holding strong," Zula reported, her voice tinged with growing alarm. "This ship is unlike anything we've encountered." Frex could feel the tide shifting, and for the first time in his career, he began to question his own judgment. He had underestimated these humans. He had expected an easy victory, a quick destruction of a primitive species that didn't stand a chance against the might of his fleet. But the human warship wasn't acting like a primitive vessel. It was acting like a seasoned fighter, with tactics and abilities that could outthink them. Suddenly, the human ship launched a series of countermeasures, small, almost invisible projectiles that tore through the void, homing in on the alien fleet. They weren't energy blasts, they were something more insidious. Before Frex could react, the projectiles struck the outer edges of the Asta's hull. The first impact was like a whisper, a faint pressure, but then the ship's systems went haywire. Warning lights blared as portions of the Asta's shields flickered and failed. Crew members scrambled to counter the damage. The Asta began to tilt, its advanced navigation systems momentarily offline as it struggled to regain control. "What just happened?" Frex shouted, his voice now tinged with panic. Zula was at her station, rapidly tapping commands into the console. "We've been hit by a disruption field. They're projectiles, some sort of jamming device. Our systems are failing." Frex could feel his pulse quicken. The disruption wasn't just damaging their shields, it was affecting their very ability to fight back. It was like the human warship had anticipated their every move, countering them before they could even react. "Retreat is not an option," Frex muttered to himself, staring out into the void. He had led his fleet into this battle with pride, but now he realized that he might have misjudged Earth's readiness for war. For the first time, Frex saw the full scale of what he had provoked. This wasn't just a human warship, it was a message. A message that they were no longer the weak, defenseless species he had assumed them to be. The battle was far from over, and it was beginning to look like the aliens were the ones who would regret this encounter. Unexpected power. The Asta shuddered violently, its hull creaking under the pressure of the unexpected disruption. Captain Frex's knuckles turned white as he gripped the control panel, his mind racing. The alien fleet, once so certain of victory, now found itself in the midst of chaos. The human warship had done the unthinkable, had outmaneuvered them, disabled their systems, and made them question everything they knew about war. "We're losing control, Captain." Zula's voice was urgent, her face pale as she worked desperately to stabilize the ship's systems. Frex's eyes were fixed on the holographic map as his fleet's ships began to waver, their once perfect formations breaking apart under the strain. The human warship, meanwhile, continued its relentless assault, using its speed and precision to stay one step ahead of the alien fleet. It was as if the human ship was more than just a weapon. It was a living, breathing entity, anticipating every move they made. "Report." Frex barked, his voice sharp with authority despite the creeping panic that gnawed at him. Zula quickly scanned the fleet's status. "Our shields are down by 30%. Weapons are malfunctioning across all ships. We need to retreat, Captain. This is no longer a battle we can win." But Frex's pride burned fiercely. To retreat would be an admission of failure, something he couldn't accept. Not yet, not when the aliens had been so certain of their victory. He would not let this human ship, this small, insignificant thing, be the reason his fleet faltered. "Continue firing," he ordered, though the words tasted bitter in his mouth. "We'll break their shields. We'll crush them before they can cause more damage." Just as he spoke, the human warship's shields flickered for a moment, a sign of weakness. It wasn't much, but it was enough to ignite a spark of hope in Frex. He gripped the armrests of his chair tightly, his voice low but full of intent. "Now, focus all fire on their shields. We finish this." The alien fleet unleashed another barrage, the weapon's power surging with enough force to melt entire continents. This time, however, the human ship was not quick enough to evade them all. The shields took the brunt of the first few shots, flaring brightly with each strike. But as more energy poured into the defense, cracks began to appear. Then, in a moment of stunning clarity, the human ship responded. Its hull seemed to hum with an energy that made the very fabric of space around it shiver. Without warning, the human vessel retaliated, not with another barrage, but with a single devastating shot that cut through the vacuum like a blade through silk. The shot struck the nearest alien ship in the middle, slicing through its shields like they weren't even there. The Aster sensors picked up the moment the beam hit, an explosion so bright it momentarily blinded the fleet's cameras. The alien ship that had been hit split apart, its massive frame crumpling as its core detonated with an air-spitting blast. It was gone in an instant, reduced to space debris. "Captain," Zula's voice trembled. That was impossible. The power output from that shot, it was beyond anything we've ever seen. Frex stood frozen, staring at the destruction on the screen, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. One shot, just one, and a ship of that size, a vessel that should have been leagues ahead of anything Earth could muster, had been obliterated. His mind raced. Could the humans have developed weapons beyond their comprehension? No alien race had ever wielded such energy, not even the mighty Zarnok Empire, a rival civilization known for their war machines. This human ship wasn't just tough, it was lethal. "Retreat," Threx ordered, his voice sharp. "We can't afford to lose any more ships. Fall back, regroup." But before he could issue a second command, another bright beam of energy flashed across the dark void. This time it targeted the Aster. The beam hit their shields with a force so intense that the entire ship lurched. Warning alarms blared, and the crew struggled to maintain control. The energy from the blast sparked through the Aster's hull, searing deep into the outer layers of armor. Direct hit, shields at 60%. Zula screamed, her hands flying across the console to try and stabilize their failing systems. Frex's heart pounded in his chest as he watched in disbelief. The humans weren't just retaliating, they were attacking with precision, hitting the weak points in their shields, targeting their engines and weapon systems. It was a strike of surgical perfection. Whoever piloted this ship, Frex realized, was no ordinary soldier. They were a strategist, someone who understood war on a level the alien fleet had never faced before. "Captain, we've lost 2 more ships. The humans, they're coming for us," Zula shouted, her face pale with fear. Frex clenched his jaw, fury rising within him. He had never imagined that the humans, a race so young, so insignificant, could have mastered such power. His fleet had never faced a foe like this, one that not only fought back, but fought smarter, harder, and with a terrifying precision. "Prepare to fire all remaining weapons," Frex growled, his voice colder than ice. "We're not losing this fight. Not now, not to them." But as he spoke, he knew the truth. The battle was slipping out of their grasp. The human warship, with its unmatched speed and unimaginable firepower, was no longer just a surprise. It was a force to be reckoned with. And Threx, the proud captain of the alien fleet, was beginning to feel the weight of an unpleasant truth. This was no longer about victory, it was about survival. The first shots had been fired. The second wave of conflict had begun, and for the first time in his career, Threx felt fear, a fear that he could not control. A mysterious edge. The alien fleet, now reeling from the surprise power of the human warship, found itself in a state of disarray. Ships that had once moved with perfect synchrony were now scattered, their formations falling apart as the human ship continued to outmaneuver and outfight them at every turn. The Aster, the fleet's flagship, was struggling to hold together under the strain, its systems still flickering from the previous onslaught. Captain Threx stood at the command center, watching the chaos unfold before him, his mind in turmoil. "We can't keep this up much longer, Captain," Zula said, her voice strained as she frantically typed commands into her console. "The fleet is losing cohesion. The human warship is too fast, too precise. Every time we think we have the upper hand, it slips away." Threx's eyes narrowed as he scanned the holographic display of the battlefield. The human warship, a sleek vessel almost too fast to track, darted through space like a ghost. It had no formal battle tactics. Instead, it seemed to anticipate every move the alien fleet made. Every shot they fired, every maneuver they attempted, the human warship countered with unsettling precision. "Captain, we're taking hits again," a crew member shouted from across the room. "The Asta's engines are critical. If we don't regroup—" "I know," Threx snapped. His mind was working furiously, but for the first time, he felt a creeping sense of doubt. He had fought countless battles, faced far more powerful enemies, but this was different. The human warship wasn't just reacting, it was calculating. Its tactics were beyond anything he had anticipated. It wasn't just surviving their attacks, it was exploiting their weaknesses. How could this be? Earth, with its primitive technology, had no right to possess such advanced warfare capabilities. "Zula, analyze their weapon systems again. Find me something we can use against them," Threx ordered, his voice barely masking the tension he felt inside. Zula nodded, her hands flying over the control panel. "I'm rescanning their energy signature. There has to be a weakness somewhere, something we're missing." The seconds dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. The Asta had sustained damage that no one had expected, and the alien fleet was on the edge of collapse. Threx's heart raced. If they couldn't find a way to counter the human ship soon, they would lose everything. His pride, his fleet, his reputation, gone in a single, unexpected encounter. Then, just as he was about to give another order, Zula's voice cut through the air. "Captain, I found something. Their weapons aren't what we thought. It's not just raw power they're using. It's a manipulation of energy." Threx's brow furrowed in confusion. A manipulation of energy, what does that mean? Zula continued without hesitation. "It's like they're bending the laws of physics themselves. Their weapons don't just destroy, they displace energy, redirect it, and create shockwaves that interfere with our systems. It's like they found a way to break the flow of energy itself." Threx blinked. "A disruption field." "Exactly," Zula replied, her voice gaining confidence. "And it's not just their projectiles, it's their entire ship. Their systems are synchronized in a way that amplifies their weapons' effectiveness. They're not just fighting us, they're disrupting our entire fleet on a fundamental level." Threx stared at the display in shock. It wasn't enough to be fast and precise. The human ship was warping the very laws of physics, using advanced techniques that seemed impossible for a species as young as humanity. The thought was almost unbearable. His fleet, once considered the pinnacle of military superiority, was now up against a power it could not comprehend. "We need to understand how they're doing this," Threx said, his voice strained. "We can't defeat them until we figure out their technology." As if responding to his thoughts, the human warship suddenly shifted its approach. It began to circle the fleet, moving in such a precise pattern that it was almost like a predator toying with its prey. Each movement was calculated, each decision made with eerie certainty. The alien fleet, already on the defensive, found itself in the human ship's crosshairs again. The human warship released another barrage of concentrated energy, but this time it didn't just aim for the fleet's shields. It targeted the weaker, unprotected parts of the ships, the engines, the communication relays, the command centers. The shots were so focused, so expertly placed, that Threx couldn't help but feel a deep, growing sense of dread. Whoever was piloting this ship wasn't just fighting, they were conducting a surgical operation. "Captain, we're losing systems. The Xantor is down," The Drakka's engines have failed. Their weapons, they're targeting our vital systems. Zula cried, her voice cracking under the pressure. Frex was gripped by an overwhelming feeling of helplessness. His fleet was being torn apart, and the human warship was still standing. Even more terrifying was the realization that it was not a fluke. The humans had studied warfare at a level that Frex's people couldn't even fathom. The ship wasn't just responding to attacks, it was actively dismantling their fleet piece by piece. How are they doing this? Frex muttered under his breath. This isn't just technology, it's something more. But before Zula could respond, another explosion rocked the flagship. A section of the Asta's hull buckled as a direct hit from the human warship punctured its outer defenses. Sparks flew, and smoke began to fill the bridge. The entire ship groaned under the stress. Frex staggered, gripping the console to steady himself. Return fire, now. Full power to all remaining weapons. If they think they can break us, they are gravely mistaken. But even as the words left his mouth, a strange thought lingered in his mind. What if they were already too late? What if the human warship wasn't just an unexpected threat? It was a harbinger of something even more powerful lurking beyond the edge of the galaxy. The mysterious power of the human warship was growing more apparent with each passing second, and Frex couldn't shake the feeling that this battle, this seemingly simple encounter, was only the beginning of a much larger story. A story that humanity had yet to reveal. The turning point. Frex's mind raced as the Asta shuddered from yet another direct hit. Smoke filled the bridge, and the hum of the ship's systems faltered as more warning lights flashed across the command center. It was as if the ship was dying. No, not just the ship, the entire fleet. Captain, Zula's voice cracked with urgency. We've lost all communication with the fleet. Our sensors are down. The Asta's main drive is failing. Frex clenched his teeth, trying to steady his breath as the weight of the situation pressed on him. The fleet, once a symbol of invincible power, was now scattered and broken, losing ships at an alarming rate. But even worse than the loss of ships was the growing sense of futility. The human warship wasn't just fighting back, it was systematically dismantling everything they had built. And it wasn't just their technology that was at risk, it was their pride. Reroute all power to the engines, Frex barked. We need to escape. The rest of the fleet is on its own. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew it was already too late. The human ship, with its almost predatory focus, was already closing in on them, its weapons poised to strike again. The thought of retreat felt almost humiliating, but the reality was clear. If they didn't break free now, they would be destroyed. The human warship closed in with terrifying precision. It moved silently, like a shadow in the vastness of space. Then, without warning, another burst of energy erupted from its guns, this time aimed directly at the Asta's engines. Frex watched helpless as the shot slammed into the Asta's rear shields, causing them to flicker and collapse under the force. Engines are offline, Zula cried, her face pale. We're stranded, Captain. Impossible. Frex spat, his voice hoarse with frustration. He couldn't believe it. His fleet was collapsing, his flagship was crippled, and the human ship, small, insignificant in comparison, had brought them to the edge of ruin. Suddenly, a sharp, unfamiliar voice cut through the chaos. It was coming from the comms channel, faint at first, but unmistakable. This is the human warship Eagle's Pride. I am Captain Adrian Hayes. You are outmatched. Your fleet is already broken. I advise you to surrender. The words felt like a slap across Threx's face. He stood frozen for a moment, unable to process what had just been said. This was a human, a captain speaking to him, the leader of an entire alien fleet, and offering a surrender. Frex's pride swelled into a storm of rage. You dare demand my surrender? Frex's voice thundered, the desperation in it evident. You think you'd have won? This is not over. Not yet. But even as he spoke, a creeping doubt began to form in the pit of his stomach. The human ship wasn't bluffing. It wasn't taunting. It wasn't trying to provoke him. It was simply stating a fact. Their victory was inevitable. "Your fleet is falling apart, Captain Frex," Captain Hayes continued, his voice calm, almost as if he were explaining something to a child. "We've neutralized your weapons, disabled your engines, and shattered your command structure. This is your final chance. Surrender now, and we will take you into custody. Your people will be spared." Frex's mind raced. The Aster's shields were down. His fleet was broken. The human warship had delivered a series of precise, overwhelming strikes that had crippled them beyond repair. What's more, they had been so quick, so organized, that Frex realized this was no fluke. The humans didn't just have a powerful weapon, they had tactical brilliance. They knew how to fight, how to counter every move, every strategy with unthinkable precision. "No," Frex whispered to himself, his voice trembling with rage. "I won't surrender." But the truth hung heavy in the air. The alien fleet was on the brink of collapse, and there was no way forward. Even Frex knew that. The battle was over, even if he couldn't bring himself to admit it. As he stood there, torn between the remnants of his pride and the undeniable reality of defeat, Zula spoke again, this time with an unusual softness in her voice. "Captain, we fought hard, but sometimes there's strength in knowing when to stop." Frex looked at her, the exhaustion in her eyes mirroring the fatigue in his own. His fleet had been shattered. His ships, once the mightiest in the galaxy, now lay in ruins. His people, his soldiers, had given their all, and it still hadn't been enough. "I've led them into the abyss," Frex said, his voice low and filled with regret. "I've miscalculated. I underestimated them." For the first time, Frex could see the full scope of what he had done. He had provoked a force that his people were not prepared for, and in doing so, he had led his fleet into ruin. The human warship was not just a physical threat. It was a symbol of something far more powerful, the will to survive, to outthink, and to overcome impossible odds. With a heavy heart, Frex activated the comms, his voice now calm but tinged with defeat. "Captain Hayes," he said, "we surrender. You've won." There was a pause, and then Hayes' voice came back, almost with a hint of admiration. "I'll take your surrender, Captain, but know this, your people have fought bravely. We don't destroy those who are worthy of respect. You'll be treated fairly." Frex felt the weight lift from his chest. It wasn't the victory he had wanted, but it was a victory nonetheless. He had made a mistake, but now he had the chance to rebuild, to learn, to adapt. As the human warship moved in to take the Aster into custody, Frex stood at the helm, gazing out into the vast emptiness of space. For the first time in his life, he realized that strength wasn't always about overwhelming power. Sometimes, true strength was about knowing when to yield. The price of pride. Captain Frex stood in the command center of the Aster, staring at the view screen as the human warship, the Eagle's Pride, floated just outside firing range. The silence that had fallen across the bridge was suffocating. The battlefield was now a graveyard, with the wreckage of several alien ships drifting through the void like forgotten relics. The once mighty fleet, now scattered and broken, had been reduced to little more than a failed attempt to crush humanity. Frex's hands clenched into fists, and the weight of failure bore down on him like a physical force. He had always prided himself on his tactical genius, on his ability to foresee and outthink any enemy. But now all of that seemed meaningless. The human warship, no, the human captain, had dismantled his entire fleet with an ease that he couldn't begin to comprehend. How did they do it? Frex muttered under his breath, his voice rough with disbelief. He had seen battlefields across countless star systems, face the most advanced civilizations, but never had he encountered a foe like this. Not only had they managed to defeat him, but they had done so with a single ship. The fort ate at him like a slow-burning fire. Zula, who had been quietly monitoring the damage reports, turned to him. Her face was pale, and her eyes held a glimmer of sympathy, but it did little to ease the crushing weight of defeat that Threx felt. "Captain, it's over," she said softly. "We've lost. The fleet can't fight anymore." Threx's eyes flickered to the wreckage of his fleet, then to the Eagle's Pride, which remained eerily still in the distance. The human warship had halted its assault, almost as if giving them a chance to make a decision. It was almost too much for Threx to bear. He had never been one to admit weakness, but now, staring into the void of space, he saw no other option. "Prepare to transmit our surrender," Threx said, his voice low but steady. His pride was broken, but he had no choice but to face the consequences of his arrogance. "But first, we need to understand who we're dealing with." Zula hesitated but complied. "Yes, Captain." The command center was tense as the transmission was sent to the human ship. It was a formal request, an admission of defeat. The crew waited with bated breath as the seconds ticked by. Then, a message flickered on the screen. "Acknowledged. Await further instructions." The words were simple, but they carried an unsettling weight. Threx felt as if the entire universe was watching, waiting for his next move. But there was something else in the back of his mind, something gnawing at him. The human warship had shown no mercy, yet it hadn't destroyed them completely. Why? What did Captain Hayes want from them? "Zula," Threx said, his voice hardening, "I need you to monitor their communications. Find out everything you can about this human captain, this Hayes. I don't trust them." Zula nodded, her fingers dancing over the console. "I'll get on it right away, Captain." Meanwhile, the crew was still recovering from the aftermath of the battle. Many of them had already begun to mourn the loss of their comrades. The defeat felt almost like a death in itself, the death of their pride, their belief in the invincibility of their fleet. Threx looked at them, each face a mirror of the crushing reality they all now faced. His heart twisted with something he rarely allowed himself to feel, regret. As he turned to look out at the stars, his thoughts drifted. He had fought wars for power, for dominance, for pride. But in all his years, he had never stopped to ask why. What had it all been for? Now, standing at the edge of his destruction, he realized that the very thing that had driven him, his pride, was the same thing that had led him to this point. If he had listened, if he had been willing to understand his enemies, perhaps this battle would have ended differently. The transmission came through shortly after. A calm, yet firm voice filled the command center. "This is Captain Adrian Hayes of the Eagle's Pride. We have received your surrender, but before any further action is taken, I have a proposal for you, Captain Threx." Threx's eyes narrowed. "A proposal?" "Yes, you've heard my warning," Hayes continued, his voice measured. "But I'm not here to annihilate your people. The human race has fought for survival for far too long to be so quick to destroy. Instead, I offer you a choice." Threx's breath caught in his throat. A choice? This wasn't the human way. Humans fought to win, and they did not offer second chances. But something in Hayes' voice, calm, direct, was different from anything Threx had expected. "Explain," Threx demanded, his voice hoarse. There was a pause before Hayes spoke again. "We are willing to allow you and what remains of your fleet to return to your home systems. But you must leave this sector. You will no longer pose a threat to the human race, and you will take with you the message that humanity is no longer a species to be underestimated." Threx's mind reeled. Leave? Live? It felt like a cruel joke. A moment ago, he had been seconds away from destruction. Now, he was being given a chance to walk away with his life. The irony was not lost on him, but it was hard to ignore the sheer audacity of it. "What do you want in return?" Threx asked, his voice betraying none of the disbelief he felt. Hayes' response was immediate. "In exchange for our mercy, we ask that you tell your people the truth. Tell them about us, about humanity's strength, about the cost of underestimating us. And most importantly, tell them we are no longer interested in war, but we will defend ourselves, and anyone who challenges us will learn that the price of underestimating humanity is too high." Threx fell silent. The offer was as strange as it was generous, and it was clear that this human captain had no intention of letting the alien fleet off easily. But the cost of pride, of arrogance, was staring Threx in the face. It had cost him everything. With a heavy heart, Threx knew he had no choice. "Agreed," he said, his voice weary. "We will leave, and we will spread your message." As the transmission ended, a deep, lingering silence filled the room. For the first time, Captain Threx understood the true cost of pride. The fleet was broken, his enemies had become his teachers, and the road ahead would be one of painful reflection and change. In the distance, the eagle's pride remained still, silent, but now, in Threx's eyes, it represented something more. It wasn't just a symbol of defeat, it was a symbol of survival and of a humanity that had risen against impossible odds. And Threx, for all his loss, was about to learn something he had never expected: the strength in knowing when to step back, when to survive, and when to grow. The unexpected alliance. Captain Threx stood at the helm of the Asta, still reeling from the events that had unfolded over the past several hours. His fleet had been shattered, his pride broken, and his understanding of warfare turned upside down. The human warship, Eagle's Pride, hovered in front of him, its guns silent for the first time since the battle began. The sudden calm felt almost surreal, like the eye of a storm, and Threx wasn't sure if it was a reprieve or the prelude to a final blow. "Captain Threx," the voice of Captain Hayes echoed in the comms once again. This time, there was no threat in his tone, only an almost pragmatic calmness. "I told you that I would offer you a choice." Threx clenched his fists at his sides, the weight of his failure heavy on his shoulders. He had expected the humans to demand his surrender, to lock him up and his crew in some far-off prison or worse. But this was something entirely unexpected. He had prepared for the worst, but he hadn't prepared for this. "What is your proposal?" Threx's voice was sharp, but beneath it, there was a thread of curiosity that betrayed his unease. There was a brief pause before Hayes spoke again. "Your people have suffered enough. I'm not offering you a chance to save face, Captain. What I'm offering is far greater. You've already experienced the power of humanity's resolve. Now, I'm asking you to consider something different, an alliance. We've seen how your species fights, and while we may not share your ways, we recognize strength when we see it. Together, we could be far more than either of our civilizations could achieve alone." Threx's heart skipped a beat. An alliance? After everything that had happened, after the destruction, after the countless lives lost, the humans were offering something as unimaginable as peace. The very idea felt foreign, like the concept too alien to grasp. You want us to join you," Threx said, struggling to process the words. He looked at his crew, all of them as stunned as he was by Hayes' offer. "Yes," Hayes replied, his voice unyielding yet oddly compassionate. "I know this may be difficult to accept, but I believe that your fleet still has value. Your tactical expertise, your resilience, it's something we could use. And in return, we would offer you protection, guidance. We fought the same battles you have, Captain, the same wars against impossible odds. But we've learned something along the way. Survival is not about defeating your enemies. It's about knowing when to work together." Threx turned away from the comms, his gaze falling on the holographic map of the galaxy displayed before him. The alien fleet, what remained of it, was scattered, broken, weak. They could not survive another conflict like this. But an alliance with humanity, could it be a chance for redemption, for rebuilding what he had lost? In that moment, a flicker of something new stirred within him. His pride, the thing that had almost cost him everything, was still there, but now it was tempered by a strange, reluctant understanding. The galaxy was vast, filled with infinite challenges and enemies far more dangerous than either humans or aliens could face alone. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was strength in accepting help. He thought of his people, his soldiers. Many had perished, yes, but many still lived, their fates hanging in the balance. Threx knew that a defeated fleet would never rebuild itself, not on its own. But this was different. He turned back to the comms with a resolve he hadn't felt before. "Captain Hayes, I've heard your offer. And while I do not agree with all of it, I must admit, your words carry weight. If we are to rebuild, we cannot do so in isolation. Perhaps it is time to look beyond our pride and consider new alliances." Hayes' voice softened, and for the first time there was a note of approval. "I'm glad you see it that way, Captain Threx. You may not agree with everything we do, and you may never trust us fully, but I believe we can create something better together. A new path for both our people." Threx looked out into the dark expanse of space, the remnants of his once proud fleet drifting slowly behind him. He had always believed that strength came from domination, from bending others to your will, but now he was beginning to see the value in something different: unity, compromise, and strength through collaboration. His crew, those who remained, were watching him closely. They had fought for him, followed him through the worst battles, and now they needed his guidance more than ever. Threx knew that whatever decision he made would shape the future of his people. The price of his pride had been great, but perhaps the cost of redemption was even greater. "You have a deal, Captain Hayes," Threx said finally, his voice steady with a newfound clarity. "We will join you, on one condition." Hayes' voice crackled through the comms, a hint of curiosity in it. "And what is that condition, Captain?" Threx's eyes burned with quiet determination as he spoke. "I want my fleet restored. I want my people to stand tall again, not as a conquered race, but as equals. I want the chance to prove that we can be more than just warriors, that we can contribute to something greater than ourselves." Hayes was silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, his words carried a promise. "Agreed. You'll have the resources you need to rebuild, and in return we will fight together, not as separate forces but as one. We will show the galaxy that even in defeat, there is strength to be found." As the comms went silent, Threx felt a sense of weight lift from his shoulders. It was not a victory in the traditional sense, but it was something far more profound. He had lost the battle, but in doing so, he had gained something he hadn't expected: a future. The Arstar would not be the only ship in the galaxy to fall that day, but the first step toward rebuilding his fleet and his people's honor had been taken, and it was a step toward a new kind of strength, one rooted not in pride, but in the ability to learn, adapt, and join forces for a greater cause. As Threx turned back to his crew, he gave a nod of resolve. "Prepare the fleet for the journey ahead. We begin again." The human fleet, once an enemy, was now an ally. And with that, a new chapter in the galaxy's endless war was about to begin, one where alliances would be tested, and strength would be found not just in victory, but in the willingness to embrace the unknown.